Good morning, guys. Welcome to today's lesson, April 23rd, Circle Equations. Today's due now. In the diagram of right triangle ABC shown below, AB is equal to 14, AC is equal to 9. Both of those are filled in there for you. What is the measure of angle A to the nearest degree? So remember, we lock in on that angle and we label accordingly. So we have our adjacent side length, our opposite side length, and our hypotenuse. So in relation to that angle, what are the two sides that are given to you? The two sides are the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So we have to think, what trig function are we going to use? So remember, we use SOHCAHTOA. Adjacent and hypotenuse tells us we're using cosine. So your setup, cosine of the angle, which let's just write our setup first. Cosine of theta is equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And now let's substitute. Cosine of x is equal to 9 over 14. Now when you're finding the angle, there's no cross multiplication. We're undoing cosine, so that's inverse cosine, cosine with a little -1 thing. And then you insert the ratio 9 over 14. And you type that in your calculator exactly as is. Inverse cosine, 9 over 14, 49.99, which would be choice 3. So what is the equation of a circle? This is definitely something that's good to take a look at. It does relate to Algebra 2 a lot. Next week we're actually going to be focusing on a lot of Algebra 2 topics. And this is something you'll see next year for sure. So here it is. Here's your equation of a circle. All right, this says the standard equation of a circle with center HK. They pick two random letters to represent the coordinates, the coordinate for the center point, and the radius r. All right, so it says x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So there's three things you need when you write out the equation of the circle. All right, and really two things you need. It's the center and the radius. But the center comes as an x and a y. So we need the x value for the center, the y value for the center, and the radius. And then you can write the equation. Those are the three things we're substituting. And once again, HK is really just the xy point for the center point. So let's see how that looks. Ready? Let's make up what this center is based on where it is on the grid. HK, let's say it's the coordinate 2, 3. And let's say the radius is equal to, I don't know, 4. So using that equation, it would be x minus the h value, which is just the x value of the center, which is 2, so x minus 2 squared, plus y minus, this is now the y value for the center, which would be 3 squared, is equal to the radius squared, which is equal to 4 squared. Now x minus 2 squared doesn't simplify, y minus 3 squared doesn't simplify, but 4 squared does. So you'd be left with x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 16. So I want you to see the whole, how it says x minus h, that just means the value for h, the sign is changing. If there's the minus, if you have a minus sign in front of a value, it just changes the sign. So if it's positive, like it was, 2, right, 2 became -2, 3 became -3, but if these were negative, they would have changed to positive. So essentially just the sign changes for the center. Okay, how the coordinate actually is, the sign changes when you put it into the equation. All right, so it's very important you see if it's positive, it changes to negative. If it's negative, it changes to positive. All right, now I want to actually show you this in GeoGebra. If we graph this, we had x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 16. Alright, you can see you got a circle. You can see the center. Alright, your center is that 0.23, and your radius is, now if I were to make a line, I could do vector. They don't let you make the radius anymore, but you can make some sort of line. And you can see the radius is, count the units, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so basically in today's lesson we're going to look at an equation like this, and we're going to be able to say, okay, this is the center point and this is the radius. Okay, and we're also going to do what we just did. We're going to be given the center and the radius, and we're going to have to write the equation. So example 1. Write an equation for the circle whose center is at 9, 0 and has radius of 7. So this you have to memorize, that circle equation. If you have that memorized, this will be a piece of cake. Alright, so it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Now, remember, hk, that's just the xy point for the center. So this would be x minus 9 squared, because this, remember, this is hk. And this is the radius. So x minus 9 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to 7 squared. Now there's actually two things that can simplify here. X minus 9 squared does not, but y minus 0. Anything minus 0 is just itself. So this would be plus just y squared flat out. If you see y squared with nothing else, with no plus, no minus, that means the point, alright, the y value is 0. And same thing if it was x. If it was just x squared by itself, alright, the x value for that center would be 0. Alright, and now this is equal to 7 squared, which is 49. So this would be your equation. So that's given the center and the radius. Here's your equation. Same thing here, the next one. Write an equation whose graph is the circle below. So you can see you have a center point of negative 2, 4. I know it's small, written small there, but that's your hk. And your radius is 1, 2 units. So we're just going to substitute. This would be x. Now, the h value is negative 2 here. Now, this is the first time we're dealing with one of the points being negative. So it's negative 2 for the h value. That changes to a positive 2 because it's like you're subtracting a negative 2, which becomes positive. So this would be x plus 2 squared plus y. Now the k value is 4, so now it's going to be subtracting 4 squared is equal to the radius squared, which is 2 squared. So this would be x plus 2 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals to 4. Just have to square that radius, and that's it. But just notice the sign change, right? They gave you negative 2 for h, now it's positive 2. They gave you positive 4 for k, now it's negative 4. So when you insert it into the equation, the signs change. Alright, now, what is the radius and center of the circle given by the equation? X plus 12 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to 81. So remember, now we're going from the equation to the center. So your center would be the point. You just have to change the sign. So the x value, or the h value, really is 12. Now we have to change that to negative 12. and you see y minus 4, that becomes positive 4. So the signs just change. Now, in your equation, right, that number on the end there is r squared. So what's being represented in the equation is not the radius flat out. You wouldn't say that the radius is equal to 81. All right, r squared is equal to 81 here. So what we have to do, we have to square root both sides to get the radius by itself. So the radius is equal to square root of 81, which is 9. All right, so for the center, the signs just change. For the radius, we have to square root when we're moving from the equation to the radius. Before it was the radius to the equation, so we had to square it, like 2 squared here. Now we're square rooting because we're working in reverse. All right, this one I just want to talk about. All right, Petra is given the equation x minus 15 squared plus y plus 4 squared is equal to 100 and identifies its graph as a circle whose center is negative 15, 4 and a radius of 10. Has she made a mistake? Explain. So her mistake is not in the fact that the radius is 10. The radius is 10. That's good because this 100 is r squared, so the same thing, you have to square root it and you end up getting 10. What's not correct is the center that she said. She should have said that the center was equal to 15, negative 4. She didn't change the signs. That's what I just want to point out in that one. All right. What is the radius of the circle with center 310 that passes through 12, 12? All right, now, if we look back at our equation of a circle, they're asking you for the radius, and they're giving you hk, all right? They're giving you h and k, the center point. Now they're giving you xy. So if you look, what is xy in the equation? Xy is any point. See here, xy? It's any point on the circle. So it could be this point on the circle, this xy, this xy, this xy, that xy. It could be any point around the circle. So if you substituted x and y, it would satisfy the equation. The equation would be balanced. It would be like checking, or checking your solution or something like that. But essentially, this is acting right now. The center is always acting as hk. But then they also could give you, they're saying it passes through a given point. That could be one of the xy values that satisfies the equation. So if we substitute, it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. That's your equation of any circle. So now we're substituting. This would be x, we have x. All right. In this case, we have the fact that x is equal to 12. Right? So once again, we're looking for the radius right now. All right. We have, we're going to substitute the x and the y because we have one of these xy values. So the x value would be 12 minus h, which would be minus 3 squared, plus y minus k. The y value is also 12, so 12 minus k, which is minus 10 squared, is equal to the radius squared. That's what they want us to find. So once again, we substituted not only hk this time, we had to also substitute an xy point because they gave us a point that it passes through. So this would be 9 squared plus 2 squared is equal to the radius squared. 81 plus 4 is equal to the radius squared. So the radius squared is equal to 81 and 4 is 85. Square root both sides. And we get that the radius is equal to, if it's not a perfect square like 81 or 64, you can just leave it as radical 85. But don't say that the radius is 85. It is not. All right, the radius is radical 85. At the square root at the end. So that's your radius. Now part B is asking for the equation. So that's where we would say it's x minus, because it could be any xy value on the circle. It doesn't have to be the point that they gave us, 12, 12. We substitute h, so it'll be x minus 3 squared plus y minus 10 squared is equal to radical 85. And once again, what this problem required, we had to substitute an x value and a y value that they gave us. But remember, that xy didn't have to be 12, 12, the point that they gave us. It could be any point that's on that circle. All right, there's an infinite amount of points that could satisfy this equation. Any point that's around the circle. All right, so describe the circle given by the equation x minus 7 squared plus y minus 8 squared equal to 9. So describe it, we're just going to say the center and the radius. So our center, we just changed the signs. So our center would be 7, 8. And our radius, remember in the equation of the circle, they give you the radius squared, not the radius. So r squared would be equal to 9, square root both sides, and we get that our radius is equal to 3. Remember guys, you have your rule for today. At any point, if you want, you could pause the video and work on them on your own, but we are going to go through the whole thing together. All right, next, write the equation. All right, so now they give us the center, and we have to write the equation. So now we're working in reverse of what we just did. So this is really representing HK, and that's our radius, not our radius squared. This is just flat out what they said, the radius. So this would be x minus 0 squared plus y plus 4 squared. We have to change it to positive 4. Y plus 4 squared is equal to, not 8. Remember, in your equation, you can scroll back up like we've been doing, in your equation is showing the radius squared. So you have to understand the difference between going from equation to center radius and from center radius to the equation. Now what we'll simplify here, remember if it's x minus 0 squared, that does simplify, that's just x squared. And then plus y plus 4 squared is equal to 8 squared, which is 64. All right. Write the equation for the circle shown below. You can see that the point here, that's the center, which is just 0, 0. All right. So this would be x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to the radius squared. You can see the radius is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be 4 squared. Now, remember, if it's minus 0, you get rid of that because that would just be x squared plus y squared is equal to 16. So anytime the x squared is by itself or the y squared is by itself, that value for the center is 0. All right. Example 5. This was a 2-point question on a Regents pretty recently ago. A circle has a center at 1, negative 2. So once again, the center is HK. And a radius of 4. Does the point, so some random point on the circle, xy, lie on the circle? Justify your answer. So remember your equation. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So we're essentially going to substitute every single thing that we know. Our x value is 3.4. Our h value, so minus 1 squared, plus the y value, 1.2, minus, so this is now 1.2, minus a negative 2, so minus a negative is actually positive. And essentially we're just changing the signs like we did 1. If you take a look at hk here, 1 in our equation becomes negative 1, negative 2 in our equation becomes positive 2. Plus 2 squared is equal to the radius squared. So we have to see if the equation is balanced. So 3.4 minus 1, so this would be 2.4 squared plus 1.2 and 2 gives us 3.2 squared, and that would have to be equal to 4 squared, which is 16. This is 5.76. And this is 10.24. Does that equal to 16? It does. So yes, that point does lie on the circle. Normally when we write the equation, we just substitute our h, k, and r, but they're asking us to essentially check, does that x, y value satisfy the equation? If it satisfies the equation, right, it's balanced, 16 equals 16, yeah, it lies on the circle. If it's not balanced, if it was like 14 equals 16, whatever, something else, then it would be no good. Alright, we're almost done here. Write the equation of the circle shown. So they give you hk as 3 and negative 2. And then our radius is just very small circle. That line is just 1 unit from in the x direction, at least 3 to 4, just 1 unit. So this would be x minus 3 squared, because it started as positive 3, now it's negative, plus y plus 2 squared, once again, started negative, now it's positive, is equal to the radius, which is just 1 squared. Alright, so this would be x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to 1. Alrighty, and the last two, consider the circles. What are the radii? We're going to say the center and the radius. So for this one, x squared plus y squared, if those are by themselves, the center is 0, 0. And the radius is equal to, well, in your equation, remember, that's r squared. So r squared is equal to 2. You'd have to square root both sides. And you would get that the radius is equal to radical 2. Remember, you have to square root if you're going from equation to saying what the radius is. Alright. And here, x minus 3 squared plus y minus 3 squared, so your center is 3, 3. And your radius squared is 32. Square root both sides, you get that the radius is equal to. Now if I was grading you on a test, something like that, I would say if you left it as radical 32, that's fine. As we're moving on to algebra 2, we really should be simplifying that. So we need the greatest perfect square that divides evenly into 32. So your perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. Anything bigger than that obviously wouldn't divide into 32. The biggest perfect square is 16, so we write it as two radicals. It'd be radical 16 and radical 2, because those two numbers multiply to be 32. So your radius would be equal to, in simplest radical form, 4 radical 2. Alright guys, your delta math is due tonight at 8 o'clock. Please make sure you get that done. Please remember what this equation means, right? Your center is the HK, your radius is the radius, right? And that XY could be used if they give you some point that it passes through. All right, so ask questions and remind. Make sure you take good notes on this when you transfer it over to your OneNote. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you mañana.